Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to all. And since the Honourable Senior Minister for Christchurch West ended on ACP-EU, which is what I was going to take up on, it just would make an expanded statement from what Honourable Foreign Affairs Minister said. The Samoa Agreement is in effect signed on the 15th of November. There was some pushback from some religious organizations urging Jamaica and Trinidad and the other islands who had not signed when we signed on the opening. But all the Caribbean countries, essentially, maybe one or two exceptions, I think only one, but all the CARICOM countries have signed. Trinidad signed and Tobago earlier this year. Sorry, about April last year, Jamaica signed as well. There was also pushback from what the Foreign Affairs Minister said on sexual and reproductive health, on abortion issues. And that was not an issue for us because we have had abortion, termination of pregnancy legislation in Barbados for over 40 years. A lot of the CARICOM countries don't have that as yet. So we had absolutely no problems in signing that. But Honourable Minister, Senior Minister, I want to give you the opportunity to speak as to where the world is at in terms of the initiative which emanated from us, from the Honourable Prime Minister 3 years ago, the Bridgetown Initiative, and we're hearing about Bridgetown Initiative 3.0. So I want to give you the opportunity to tell this Parliament and, you know, this country, both here and abroad, where that initiative which emanated from our government, our Prime Minister, our country is at.
Thank you, Honourable Member. And let me take the opportunity to thank you for the work that you now do in the capacity that the Honourable Senior Minister who preceded you had done with the European Union. Honourable Member, Mr. Chairman, I call to mind an observation which had been made, I believe it was loosely made in a speech, that, you know, when they came for the communists, I did nothing because I was not a communist. And then they came for the trade unions and I did nothing because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews and I did nothing because I was not a Jew. And eventually they came for me, but there was no one left to speak for me. And that really is how it is with the question of the planet. There are those who have chosen out of either convenience or to turn a blind ear or a convenient eye on the situation as it confronts our planet. I think we are fortunate, Mr. Chairman, to have a leader of government that has not chosen the pathway of least resistance or to recline herself on a cushion of comfort, but has rather chosen to walk on a bed of nails and ask the world as a whole to consider the reality of what is happening to the planet, especially as it impacts on small states. That she has done so has seen some fruit, because right now the Prime Minister of Barbados has been selected as the leader of what is called the Climate Vulnerable Forum. It is a global partnership of states which are disproportionately affected by climate and by the climate crisis. Its mission is to engage the industrial powers of the world in relation to the social and the economic vulnerabilities which confront some of our small states and which are consequential upon the climate crisis. Barbados raised its voice on this matter because we believe formally, or I should say fundamentally, that there is and there should not be a clash between a choice on one hand of what you do to protect the interests of your people, and on the other hand, what you do to protect the interests of the planet. And that is what gave birth to the Bridgetown Initiative, which is now in its second or third iteration. The idea behind it is also about increasing and redirecting the flow of finance, what is called or the financial architecture. And we are trying to ensure that there is a reshaping of the international financial system. And why is that important? It is important because you want to make sure that the globe as a whole now understands that there is a connection financially between the planet within which we live and the way in which countries, especially those who are the most vulnerable, are predisposed almost, but certainly affected by the way in which some of the climate changes impact upon us, and we are disproportionately affected in that way. To condescend to some specifics, issues like sea level rise, about which this country really does not speak sufficiently among ourselves, but it is a reality confronting all small island states. If you think about the reality of sea level rise, you're recognizing already that in the islands of the Pacific, some countries have been or are in danger already of being swallowed up. Large portions of their landmass, their terrestrial space, has already gone underwater. Ask ourselves for a moment to pause and think of a west coast of Barbados where Paynes Bay has started to disappear, where Fitz Village has disappeared, where Prospect has disappeared. That is the existence of some states in the Pacific. The other issue of drought, we understand in this country only too well because the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister of Barbados had to come to the nation in 2023, I believe it was, with a special arrangement in place in order for us to mitigate the use and conserve the use of our water, because for the first 5 months of that year we had rainfall which was 53% below the average for the last 30 years or so. The question of extreme weather events and storms, I don't have to tell anybody in this house about that because we've all lived on that with that reality, and we understand, and in fact top of mind should be Hurricane Beryl, which had its own peculiar impact on us only a few months ago. And then of course there's the question of loss and damage. The consequences of these events has been that serious loss physically and financially has been incurred, and as a result of that loss being incurred, Mr. Chairman, there has to be some way of recovery. Now, what has been the successes of Barbados raising the gaze of the world to these issues, and the voice of the Prime Minister being a leading voice in this matter? And people like to belabor the fact that obviously, if you are going to lead a group like the Climate Vulnerable Forum, which is 68 or 70 countries, I can't remember off the top of my head, you're going to have to be doing some traveling, you're going to have to be doing some negotiating, you're going to have to be doing some advocacy and some lobbying. It can't all be done from Bridgetown, Barbados, though we have brought several people here to Bridgetown, Barbados to see firsthand, for example, the way in which our West Coast and our other aspects of our country are being reshaped as a result of the climate crisis. We've had successes. The so-called debt pause clause, which is really a pause on the repayment of debt for a period of 2 years or so in the aftermath of let's say a hurricane, and the opportunity given to the government of the country affected to be able then to say, I no longer have to repay this debt on a monthly basis or annual basis for 2 years. What I can now do is to take the money that I would have otherwise to look for and repurpose it for the purposes of ensuring that I can rebuild the schools that get knocked down, that I can replace the hospital and the polyclinic that got damaged, that I can ensure that the airport is functional again. In the case of Beryl, that the fishing marinas are able to operate as they did before, that the Bridgetown Harbor can be repaired. Those are the real man on the street, very realistic issues that we've had to confront, and that we now have been able to get multilateral development banks, the people who lend countries money, to understand that you write into the contract of a loan that there is a provision for a state in those circumstances to be able to benefit. That is a direct benefit of what we have been doing with the Bridgetown Initiative. Again, another success has been the ability to get the IMF, International Monetary Fund, to review their policy on surcharges. On every loan, there is a surcharge attached to it as a means of managing the way in which you treat the loan and making sure that the person who is borrowing or the country that's borrowing is being responsible. And we have said to them that, look, the surcharges are making loans more expensive than they need to be, and we need to revise that policy. And in the case of Barbados, it has not only successfully been done, but it now saves us, I believe we now save something in the vicinity of $12 to $16 million every year as a result of that. And then, of course, the question of governance of the international institutions, the multilateral development banks. These were entities created after World War II. We were colonies then. Nobody took us as being significant. But we have to have a voice in today's world. And so therefore, there's now an acceptance that we must rethink governance and have representatives. I think it has been agreed that Africa will be represented on the board of the World Bank. I know for sure that there's, at the United Nations, again, a space will be made at Security Council for the African countries and others like us who are exposed disproportionately to the climate crisis. So I think, Honourable Member, that is about as far as I could go within the time allocated to me to explain to you where we are and what the Bridgetown Initiative really is about.
Thank you, Honourable Senior Minister. I will next move on to our relations with China. Very important. China, of course, 1.4 billion people, second largest population in the world, I believe surpassed around the middle of last year by India, according to the official statistics. And it was this party in government that, 47 years ago, entered into diplomatic relations with China. At the same time, I believe, as Trinidad, Jamaica, and Guyana did. And we've had very good relations with them. After all, we're friends of all, satellites of none. And certainly last year, many members of this parliament traveled to China on official business. You, Honourable Chairman, accompanied me on one visit. If you know, the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister went, Honourable Senator in the other place, now Minister of Educational Transformation, he went right after us. I believe Senior Minister of Christchurch West also went. China is an opportunity for us in terms of expansion of business and our rum, which is the #1 rum in the world, and just up to last year's budget and financial statement, I think it was 2 years ago, Honourable Prime Minister, Minister of Finance spoke about expansion of our rum industry and that we need to export more rum, and I believe this is an opportunity, one of many opportunities we have for China, in spite of the far distance. And I want Senior Minister to give you the opportunity to tell us about our relations with China as they stand at this time.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Our relationship with China continues to grow from strength to strength. And I take the opportunity to say to you that you're quite right. I think it was in 1967 that the late national hero, the Right Excellent Earl Walton Barrow, who obviously would have been Prime Minister of Barbados at that time, made that very profound statement, which has been honored as a time-honored statement. I think there's been no government of the country that has departed from it, that we will see ourselves as friends of all and satellites of none. What I think people often forget is that he went on to say that ours will be a diplomacy not of power, but a diplomacy of development. And in many regards, therefore, as with Cuba, we have found a development partner with China. It offends some people apparently because they look only at the ideology of the country without recognizing that we are able to and have successfully been able to navigate the simplistic ideological issues and deal really with simple development issues as we treat to the country of China. And in so doing, we've been able to sit at a table of negotiation and with respect tell them that we do not share necessarily their perspective on a number of things, but having said that, as one developing country to another, we believe that there is room for us to have dialogue on matters of mutual concern and of significance. I'm happy to say that with this administration, China was very pleased as they themselves came to realize that the smog which would have been in Beijing and the burning of coal and so on, which for an industrial nation is not necessarily the most efficient way to go forward, was not necessarily either the best way of doing business for them. And they were quite pleased to recognize that we have an ambition, which is to see ourselves entirely fossil-free, dependent on fossil fuels by 2035. And so therefore, issues then of mutual significance and importance become easy to discuss. Renewable energy. And as a result of that meeting of minds, entirely free of ideology, entirely free of ideological constraints and constructs, we are talking now about simple development and what is the most efficient way of taking a country forward. China has decided that it will move full speed ahead in the sphere of renewable energy and has now become one of the leaders in the world in terms of its production and output of renewable energy vehicles. I believe that there are a few members of this cabinet who now drive some of those renewable energy vehicles which have been imported into Barbados. Equally, they have assisted us in terms of low-cost financing because of our own developing country status to be able to access a fleet of electric buses, which I think is not a strange development to anybody in this place. And that fleet is being expanded. I believe that there is another, there are 59 electric buses on the roads now, and there are another, I don't want to hazard a guess, but I think it is roughly 60 odd that are supposed to be here in early May, I am advised. In similar measure, we have been able to last year we visited, or was it year before? We visited Beijing, met with President Xi Jinping himself, and had discussions about our ambitions in terms of sports. And in an effort to collaborate with us as a developing country, China has lent substantial technical expertise and advice in terms of the design and the work to be done on a national stadium for Barbados. That work continues apace, and we are still very much engaged with the Chinese on the national stadium, which will obviously place our young athletes and indeed our more senior citizens in a position to ensure that we have the very best of not only sports but personal health care as well. The education sector has also benefited. I believe that at Duke's there is a food processing or food skills center which is being built with the assistance of the Chinese and also at Hope as well. And this is a collaboration between our Ministry of Education or the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus here in Barbados, and the government of Barbados with the government of the People's Republic of China. In terms of trade, it is correct to say that Barbados rum is now on the shelves of the Chinese commercial places, and similarly, there is a hope that one day we will have more tourism from China. That is long-haul tourism by any stretch of the imagination. It's not something that can happen tomorrow morning, but the important things is that you put the frameworks in place. And so therefore, recognizing Barbados as one of those destinations for whom permissions will be granted for that type of travel. Because remember, we are still talking about a social and economic structure that is very different from ours. In our case, you get a passport, go on a plane, and sometimes you don't even tell your boss that you're leaving the island. More requirements are necessary on the Chinese side. But these are the discussions that have been taking place, and as I just indicated, there is a lot of fruit that has come from, have been harvested from the tree, and long may it continue.
Thank you, Senior Minister. Now, with your permission, Honourable Chairman, I'll direct attention to Africa. I believe that it is an indisputable fact that this administration has made the most concerted efforts, more than any other previous administration, to develop relations with the African continent and our African diaspora. The only other time in my recollection we have made such an effort was in the last term of office, 71, 76 of the Right Excellent Errol Barrow, when we had quite a few cultural exchanges with Africa. I remember going to the then newly built National Stadium and seeing, I think it was South Africa and Botswana, other cultural shows with Africans who came to Barbados on official cultural shows. And Honourable Senior Minister, I want to give you the opportunity to speak in wider detail. I know you mentioned it briefly in terms of our relations, our thrust into the African continent, and why clearly you believe this is of benefit to our country in an era where, you know, our relations, as you have said earlier, with our traditional partners, United States and others are clearly, especially within the last few weeks, are going to be challenged, and where multilateralism, which had prefaced relations, global relations, is now under threat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. And let me then begin on the question of multilateralism, because as I said at the very outset, I philosophically remain aligned, and I think I am fixed and immovable on this question of the importance of multilateralism. Many states coming together in order to find common understanding, to find partnership, to find purpose in the broader interest of peace and prosperity, and quite frankly, as I just indicated, on the climate matter, on the well-being of our planet. And I think that is something that is a fundamental. My view is that for a small island like Barbados, with a shrinking population, now down back virtually to 266,000 again, we would have no voice, and we would simply be rendered irrelevant if we do not find partnerships with others. And we have to find partnerships, in my judgment, Mr. Chairman, with states that are like-minded and that are in a similar development dimension and are prepared to prioritize some of the things that we consider to be fundamental. The development trajectory of the country, the protection, again, of the planet and the environment. These are common issues that we will find synergy with other states on. Africa is one of those states, and it is pregnant with potential, pardon the pun. I believe, Mr. Chairman, the history of the administration is very clear. We opened a mission in Kenya. We opened a mission in Ghana. I have already indicated the fruits of that in a very real sense, because there are folks lying down in a bed in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital now or in a polyclinic somewhere in Barbados who are being treated, as I speak, by Ghanaian nurses sourced through the efforts of the mission over there. Success, we have been recognized by Africa in the context of being the sixth dimension of the African Union, so that the advocacy and the outreach and the partnership has now come to a point where the African Union sees itself not only now South Africa and West Africa and East Africa and Central Africa and North Africa, but also seeing the Caribbean and the diaspora and the leadership in the Caribbean as the sixth dimension of the African continent. That in itself will bear more fruit on the 7th of September this year, because there will be the first ever in-person summit between the heads of state and government of the African Union and the CARICOM heads in Ethiopia on the 7th of September of this year. And obviously on that agenda will be issues of mutual concern. How do we treat to the question of the planet and climate? How do we treat to the question of reparations? And also more economically advantageous issues to us in the context of commerce and commercial development. Mr. Chairman, the Honourable Member has asked a question which now begs me to go even further. We have to recognize that this country, and by extension this region, is short on skills. And there are some skill sets that are absolutely necessary if Barbados is going to continue to work the way Barbados is expected to work. Right now, the Kenyan High Commissioner should be on the ground in Ethiopia, or if he's not there yet, will be there soon, engaging with the Ethiopians on issues relating to those skill sets, because we are trying, as we did with the nurses in Ghana, to be able to source skills out of Ethiopia as well. And what are some of those fundamental skills? We keep talking about renewable energy and our renewable energy effort, but we do not have the technical expertise in terms of electrical engineers, electricity generation specialists, but we must do electricity generation planning. The Honourable Senior Minister with responsibility for infrastructure needs to have electrical generation planning capacity and transmission planning capacity if this country is to be satisfactorily serviced in terms of our renewable energy effort. Equally, economic statistics are exceptionally important. You can't manage an economy saying, I feel that so-and-so is the case, or so-and-so used to happen, and it should happen. There needs to be precision. You need to have those people who are specialized in economic stats and social and demographic statistics. That is necessary for the functioning of the Barbados Statistical Service. We are trying to source those skill sets. Again, a basic requirement, math teachers. They are needed in the Ministry of Education. And you don't walk down every street and butt upon somebody who can be or is a specialist math teacher. We know that this government has had to endure hacks in some of our sensitive installations and institutions, cybersecurity specialists. So the conversation is being had in Africa to source some of those skills. It is being had with India to source some of those skills. There will be a High Commissioner from India on the ground within 2 weeks' time, and the dialogue with him specifically is going to be along the same lines of skills, servicing some of the skills deficits that we have in Barbados. So, Honourable Member, I say to you that that is the way in which we see Africa. Obviously, tourism is one of those things that we continue to work on, and the aviation links are matters of discussion. I wish that it could happen faster, but there is an economic requirement and an economic imperative. And anybody who is really serious about this accepts it. Above and beyond being able to thump our chest and say a plane has arrived, we want to keep a route serviced. We want to know that the plane can be filled when it leaves Barbados and go back to Africa, and we want to know it can be filled from Africa to Barbados. And 3 and 4 trips is not going to do that. It has to be able to be done every day of every week, or at least a couple days a week of every week. And therefore, the economics of it is what is being discussed. and work through. There are certainly expressions of interest. There's a genuine willingness now on the part of some of the African heads of government with whom the Prime Minister and I have met. Last we were up there a couple of weeks ago to assist us in getting this off the ground by seeding, as they put SWD, put some money behind the flights. But the fact of the matter is, it can't only be reliant on government subsidy. That would not be good financial husbandry. And so therefore, what we are aiming at is to make sure we can create the right framework. We will help it get off the ground, but then you must, pardon the expression, keep it in the air.
Thank you, Honourable Senior Minister. And